Welcome back to The Real Recovery Show. We meet here every week at noon on Fridays, and each episode we have a different topic. Today's episode really focuses on spirituality and the need for spirituality in our recovery. Whatever that looks like. You know, I could have 20 different people on the show and they will tell us a whole different perspective of what spirituality means to them, and etc. And even with 12-step recovery programs, one of the strongest topics is whether or not it is a religious program as opposed to being a spiritual program. And there's so many different ways of attacking the programming within our own minds, where we are running on this idea that we are by ourselves completely. We can't trust anybody or anything, and that we, armed with knowledge that we have accumulated in our lives, are the experts on how we're supposed to be living. And then if we're really honest with ourselves, all we need to do is look at how we feel and how we're living and the results in our relationships and our work and everything, to be able to realize that that doesn't really work as well as we like to believe that it is. And so I truly believe that even a lot of people who consider themselves atheistic are actually not atheists. Over time, it's really just a strong aversion to the official religious God concept, and that most of us are really more agnostic than we even realize. You know, like, I was born Jewish, and like, I would joke conveniently Jewish, you know, like we were very Jewish on a holiday. And of course, you know, I needed to get bar mitzvahs, so we were very Jewish then. And I was like eye on the prize, getting the, you know, the people and the presents. But I knew nothing about Judaism and the spirituality of that belief system. And I, you know, go to school at a regular public school, and our society has a lot of Christian-based ideals, and so there's a lot of that, you know, what it means to be bad or good, and the idea of sin, you know, being something that, you know, you have to make up for, not just a mistaken judgment, etc. And for me, getting into recovery has been a lot of redefining my ideas of not just what a higher power could look like, but what my relationship with a higher power could look like, and forgiving a lot of stories I had, a lot of judgments I had about a lot of religions and the people in it. You know, I had very strong opinions about it, and which is kind of really difficult, because when I would go to recovery type gatherings, a lot of times they would be held in churches, and not because of any affiliation with the church itself. It was just renting a room from the church. But
the only people that would rent a room, probably.
Oh, and by the way, we're joined here with Kevin.
Sorry. Just jump
There's
in.
a voice coming from the side, and so he's going to be sharing as well on this topic. So thank you. So over time, I've had to really define, but, you know, we're scared of what we don't know, and we judge what we don't understand. And sometimes we are our own worst enemy, because we have contempt prior to investigation, and we know what we know, and we have proof in our mind, and it's in a folder, and it's neatly tucked away, and I don't need to be wrong, because this is what I think, this is what other people that had sided with me think, this is maybe what my whole family thinks, and this is just the truth. And, you know, wars based on everybody believing that their way is the way, and judgments and separation. And for me, what spirituality is it's what makes everything cohesive. Whereas I feel like unintentionally, sometimes certain organized religions can be alienating, you know? More so now, I've noticed, and maybe it's just because of my own recovery and my own growth, but I've noticed a lot more inclusiveness rather than exclusiveness in a lot of organized religions. A lot more like come as you are, and it's okay. but yet let's teach you our way and whatever like that. And, you know, take what you like and leave the rest. You know, in recovery circles, I cringe a little bit when people chastise organized religion, because somebody who is newly sober or clean could very much come in with a belief that they like about their organized religion, and that works for them to the point that they're at least there now and they'll redefine it for themselves. But, you know, to each their own. And recovery is an inside job, and it's an internal journey of reversing the behavior of seeking for it to be whatever it is, my solution, my whatever, to be in a bottle, in a pill, in somebody else, in anywhere but me. And paradoxically, we find that coming to find out what a power greater than us looks like, we find that it's within. It's a connection within we are part of, and etc. And whatever that looks like, whether it's the person who believes that they're an atheist but runs on their gut feeling, or whatever it is that they know to be true, but they don't know how they know it to be true. By the way, this is my dog. He's on the episode today too. Everybody's introducing themselves today. So spirituality is a journey, and what it looks like for us changes. And so I'm super excited to have Kevin here today, because when I hear Kevin speak, he speaks honestly, and he's sincerely seeks to learn how something, like, to change the narrative for himself, to find something that really resonates with him. And it doesn't have to resonate with anybody else, you know, and he'll be the first to tell you that, but he will share what works for him, because he's seeking it, and not to separate, but to help bring together, you know. And I love that in anyone. And to me, that is spirituality. I don't care what religion you have, what God you believe in, or whether or not you believe in a God. But if what you're doing is allowing you to join with others and be helpful and forgiving and tolerant, then to me, it's all the same thing, just under a different umbrella. So thank you for joining us. I would love to hear some of your backstory of maybe what it was like, you know, growing up, or, you know, even in your addiction, you know, and how it correlates to what you believed then, and what ended up needing to change.
Absolutely. So, actually, I grew up in an okay home. My dad was a drunk. No, not the nicest guy in the world, but comparable to how he was with my brother and my sister and my mom, not so bad, right? He just called me names and stuff. It wasn't that big of a deal. My mom is an angel. So while my dad would curse the day away, I've never heard my mom curse a day in her life, right? She doesn't drink, she doesn't smoke, she doesn't do anything, right? Mm-hmm. So she's literally, I model myself to be more like her. I love her traits, and I like the way she's compassionate to everyone around her. And I definitely hold true to that. And my whole time of recovery, one thing that has always resonated with me that my mom said was, I want to help people. I like helping people more than I dislike being disappointed by them. And that made a big difference to me, because it made it to where I could help people without having to assume I'll get something in return. So a lot of this all started, like, I was a drunky juggy for a long time, right? And I did all kinds of stuff, right? All up and down. I was in college one day. I remember looking around and I was like, do I sound this stupid when I'm high, right? And I stopped everything right there, and I decided I was going to focus on the stuff I had going on. So I never did anything again. I got married. I was drinking the entire time. I was drinking a lot, right? But nobody really questioned that. I drank a lot, and then I met the woman of my dreams, right? I still remember the moment I fell in love with her. We were in a studio together. I did a morning show just like this, and she turned around to look at me, and I can still picture what she's wearing and the way her hair flowed in that moment. And I realized I was in love with her, right? That time, that's the girl I ended up marrying, right? So we drank together pretty badly, actually. So much so that we were allowed to make a bed inside the studio, because it was easier for us to go from the bars to work than get up in the morning to go to the show. Yeah, so they would just let us sleep on the floor, which I did quite often, right? Quite often. And but here's the problem. So I have this idea of what my God looks like. My mom was a Sunday school teacher. My sister ran a church. I'm very fond, or I'm not. Well, actually, I am fond of Christianity, but at this time I'm not, right? But I'm very familiar with it. And I just don't understand it because it's a whole lot of guilt on me. And I've done a lot of things that I don't believe are accepted by the church. And more importantly, I know a lot of people that are in that church, right, that act like they don't do that stuff, and yet they do.
Right.
So you're like, dang, what is up with you? You know what I mean? Like, how can you look me in the face and tell me how terrible all these people are?
Right.
And yet you're doing it.
Right.
Or maybe you haven't got caught yet, but you will. So that I have this idea that it's all about what not to do, and I can't handle that, right? And there's going to be a translation soon coming from, instead of what not to do, what to do, right? But I don't know that yet because guilt is running the show.
Right.
So my wife dies, right? She gets sick. We don't know what happens, right? We know she has something, there's big old reports on it. She got sick. She ended up in a wheelchair. About a year later, one day she woke up, didn't know where she was. A little bit after that, hours after that, she ended up passing away.
They didn't know what it was? What happened? They still don't know?
No, they don't. Part of it was cirrhosis of the liver, right? But she didn't have it 3 months ago, which is very rare that it would just kick on like that. So something happened that destroyed the liver. But the problem was we drank so much that you couldn't really tell. Right? So there was no way of looking at it because her liver was always beat up. So end game result, we had a very, very good doctor, very crazy guy. So even ended up saving a woman in his doctor's office with a 7-Up bottle and a pen. Right, that's a real deal thing, right? He's an amazing guy, and I met the lady too, and but he said he went through all the paperwork, they just couldn't figure it out. Anyways, at that point in time, God doesn't care, right? I don't think God hates me or anything because I never question the fact that He exists, but I don't believe that He hates me. I just don't believe He would care. Like we're a bunch of ants,
so
doing our
distant,
thing.
So busy with other things, more important.
And we're here for His entertainment, right? And
did you ever have that story about like you think like you're in like you're a science experiment and you think that God is just going, you know what? Maybe if I move this person here or do that.
Yeah, exactly, right? That would be ridiculous.
Yeah.
And
then we go and we have a little ant farm and we go, isn't that interesting? And God's going, isn't that interesting?
Oh yeah, I think I've seen a comic strip like that.
Probably.
Yeah, but it was weird because I don't think He had any effect on us. And for a long time, I can imagine He didn't have a real big effect on us. It was like just there, right? And He was just there because how could He let my wife die? He couldn't have let her die. Like I couldn't imagine He was like, that's the one, I'm just going to let her go and we'll move on to somebody else. Because why would He do that? Now, if I look in the grand scheme of things, infancy and spirituality is if you're only, 30 years old. She was 38 at the time. If she was only 38 years old, I mean, in as far as spiritual life is concerned, I'm sure that's pretty young, right? It's like a baby. So it's not like I don't know. But so I didn't know where I was going with that. I forgot. But anyway, so the idea that He would have let her go didn't make sense to me. So I just assumed He didn't care. So once that happened, it's hard to invest in something I don't see a future in, right? And once my wife...
Or even in need.
Yeah. So my wife was gone. My future was gone. Right? So my houses, my radio show, everything. I just kind of slowly gave everything up. I stopped caring. And I started getting into meth and heroin and it just kept me going, right? It gave me times of my life I could skip past. So that's really what I want. It's not that I want to be high. I just don't want to be here.
Yeah.
Right? And I don't want to die either. So it's like, I wasn't one of those suicidal people, right? I think I'm fantastic, right? But I think the world I live in is terrible. So I'm okay with fast forwarding to only the happy parts.
The world is terrible, and I wanted to die.
Yeah.
So yeah. So, anyway.
I didn't care if I died.
Did you feel like, because I know, we joke about how alcohol is the spirit, like they call it spirits, and that we were looking to change our thinking and our experience and our feelings, that in some way you were looking for some sort of connection that could somehow, maybe on a deeper level, match what you're now experiencing later by looking for it in alcohol and drugs? Or were you just really just anywhere but here, I mean?
I think I was more just anywhere but here. I wasn't looking for any kind of connection.
I was wanting something. I was wanting to be anywhere but here, and I wanted to feel anything but this. But I was wanting something, and I did some spiritual things, with like tarot cards. And tarot cards are great when you're not high.
Yeah, I bet.
Ouija boards.
I love them.
Ouija boards with friends while everybody's high, and then we're like freaking out and throwing the thing in the dumpster because it told us something. I joke that I've had to heal from things in recovery that never happened.
Really?
Yeah, that never happened. Because when you're high, you will come up with stories, and there's this disconnect from the part of the mind that goes, yeah, that's not true. But you're high, and so the mind goes, could be true. That's true, and then like you'll experience it as if it's true, and like that's why I would have major panic attacks sometimes, because my mind would be like, that could happen, sure, I scared the crap out of myself.
That's funny. Yeah, I think it's the opposite for me. I always assume it didn't happen, and then someone's like, "Oh no, it did." And you're like, "No, it didn't."
Did you see yourself?
Yeah, you did. Like, I got cameras. We got cameras in our pockets now. So, yeah, totally, I feel that.
Yeah.
But I don't know, man. I think that so after she died, and after I ended up living on a chair in a trailer park, right? That's where I ended up in this whole thing. And I don't know if it was like so there's going to be these epiphanies that I have, like all throughout my recovery, where everything goes silent for just enough time for me to get a message, right? Eventually, I realized that's the Holy Spirit, if you want to identify it as something. At least the way I see it is the breath of God, right? This tingly feeling where I get, excitement, anxiety, it all builds up. Like you have to translate it in however you want to see it. But in that moment of time, man, all these people were walking around me, and I was living on a chair. Like, how are you comfortable with that? How are you comfortable with this dude living on a chair in front of your house? Just like, it's life, But this isn't life.
Right.
Like if I walk around my neighborhood right now, there ain't nobody outside living on a chair. Right? But instead of a tweaker pad, all of a sudden that's okay. This is comfortable.
Right.
There's people living in the van that was broken down whose chair it was in front of, right? I'd stayed in that van for a couple of days, by the way, living the good life. But so in that moment in time, I'm like, dude, what happened to me? You know what I mean? And I never did anything great while I was high. While I was doing the radio show, I did it, Boys and Girls Club. I raised a bunch of money for them, a bunch of money for the backpack program, Shop with a Comp, West Care Women's Shelter. I had a list, right? And everybody appreciated what I did for them. However, I never did anything, man. Once I started getting high, I cut myself off from the sunlight of the Spirit. And that's when I do that, I've decided that I'm going to isolate myself. I'm going to work solely off character defects, and these are going to be things that as I practice, they're just flaws in my character.
Survival skills,
right? It's after a while things get twisted. I even brought that up to somebody before. I know that I worked at a behavioral health place, and I would ask these people like, why do you want to get clean? And they would say, because I want to be a good mom or a good dad or whatever. And I'd say, well, why? And they say, because my kids deserve that. I'd be like, well, why? And because I love them. And it's like, well, what does that say about you when you get high? And so they would get shocked, and most of the moms especially would be like, "You're trying to say I don't love my kids? I'll fight you right here,
Oh my God!
But that's not what I'm saying.
Right.
You do love your kids, right? And so that's not the issue. The issue isn't your love for your kids; it's what you're willing to accept of yourself at that point in time.
Right.
So that bar has been lowered so much,
right,
that their version of love is very askew.
And it becomes the new normal.
Yes.
It just becomes the new normal.
And that's what when we're talking about these defects, right, of the type of character I have, this is over time. I didn't just become this. I eventually made my way through that. When I first started using, it was a party scene at this club. I'm not going to mention it, but this club. And as time went on, I'm all of a sudden living in a chair. I didn't jump from the nightclub life
it's a slow
to the
cook.
chair. Yeah.
It is a slow cook.
But imagine how many things I have to get comfortable with to live in a chair.
Yeah.
And I think that's okay.
Yeah. Yeah.
So I'm absence of any kind of growth, right? I'm not looking for a future, and I don't care. Up into that moment, I did, right? And then I get up and I start walking, down the way, and my brother happens to call me and ask me if I need a place to stay. Or it was my sister calls. And I said, yeah, actually I do, coincidentally. She doesn't know I'm homeless, right?
Like always.
Yeah. Well, no, she doesn't know that. I don't tell them anything. As far as
Right.
they're concerned, I always have a place, right? And she's like, for some reason, I just felt like calling you to see if you need a hotel room. And I was like, as a matter of fact, I do. How crazy. Like, it was the weirdest thing for her to call and ask. That's what made it such a big deal. So I think this is a God shot, right? I'm going to go and I'm going to get in this hotel while we go through all these issues. And she says, well, I got you a hotel room because I wanted to get you out of the place that you were, right? Because where she thinks I'm living is a junkie town, right?
Okay.
So she moves me into this hotel, and that's why she picks it. So I get in this hotel. First thing I do is start calling over my friends, right? Come over, I got a hotel room. Let's get lit. So none of them show up because obviously I'm a dirtbag at this point. They're like, yeah, whatever. You got no money, you got no dope. We're not coming over.
Right.
So they don't come over, and I end up falling asleep. And I wake up first morning. I wake up sober or clean or whatever you want to call it. And it's my mom's birthday.
Excuse me. Sorry.
So I call my mom.
Shh. No barkings. No barkings, babies. All right. They're not there anymore. All right. Go ahead.
So I call my mom for her birthday. She doesn't answer. Right then. The one woman that's supposed to love me unconditionally cannot bear to do it anymore. I decided I didn't want to use it anymore. That's unmanageability, right? Like, that's when I decide that my life is just totally in ruins.
I heard that a bottom, and it took me a lot of years in my recovery to get to my own really true, like, this is my definition of a bottom, and it's stuck with me ever since. It has nothing to do with form. It's when something about your life has become finally intolerable to you. Because like you said, we will incrementally accept things that if you were to tell us to go from point A to point F, there's no way we would have accepted it. But A to B, okay. B to C, maybe.
Absolutely.
You know, and by the time you get to F, you're worn, you know, and F is like, no big deal. Of course, this is what I got to do. You know, this is what I'm doing. And I, you know, because I was homeless too, if you can say that, homeless. But I was telling myself the delusion that this is my step up. This is the thing I need to do. I need to regroup. I just need a break from this. I need to focus. I need to, whatever it is, this is what's my issue was these people, whatever I was doing. And I'm going to be okay now. I'm going to be okay now. So it would not just say that this next thing was okay. It was that it is okay because I'm going to be okay now. Like, I'm going to be okay. It's going to be okay. But like, nothing changes. And so I'm bringing the same sick mind and the same sick body who is addicted to something. And I have no solution, no new tools, and I am still in the same playground with the same playmates, with the same headspace, and there is no way, you know, that anything is going to happen differently unless something happens that's intolerable finally, significantly to me. And everybody has a different thing of what it is. You can hear somebody who bottomed because the doctor told them that they have cirrhosis of the liver, right? But you tell somebody else that just kind of resigned the fact that they're going to die anyway, and why not, you know, go out with a bang? And they laugh and scoff at that. You know, if somebody loses their job, it could be like one of the worst things for somebody's whole self-concept and their self-esteem, and it can make them want to do something different, knowing that they got called out because of their alcohol or drug use or something like that. But another person losing their job another Monday, you know, it's not that big of a deal, you know, and so yeah, you know, to get to a place where there's this clash within us, and I do feel like it's that moment where everything pauses. You stop telling yourself it's going to be okay the way it is. And you say, you know what? There has to be another way. There has to be.
Yeah.
You know, and that's a deeper voice speaking now. Because the mind that's so busy trying to talk itself into what it's doing over and over and over and over and over again, rationalizing, justifying, putting energy into fighting, isolating, you know, moving locations, switching what we're doing. Like, I have several addictions for a reason, right? I switched seats on the Titanic. So, right?
Yeah.
The mind finally has no place to go. It's like it's gone through its maze and something has become intolerable to itself in that moment, and it can't. It just can't do it anymore like that. It has to be another way. It has to be. And that's what happens when somebody bottoms, which is why if you're new to recovery and you're looking and you're comparing your insides to everybody's outsides, and you're comparing your experience with drugs and alcohol to what other people are saying, like, do yourself a favor and don't, you know, because have you gotten to a place that you are not happy with where you're at and you would like to give yourself a new chance in a new way, or not? Because it has nothing to do with anybody else. You will find people that have had similar experiences, and you will find people who have had very, very different experiences. But it's about focusing on what is true for you and what you really want, that desire to get better that comes from a deeper place than our little egos. Our little egos wants to stay doing the same thing, but our spirit gets to speak now. I'm glad you asked. I would like to show you another way. And then a way appears, because the mind it stops, it pauses. I love how you describe that. There's this moment of stillness, of silence, when the mind stops chattering and stops making its deal with you, and the disease doesn't have you for that moment. And you just like wake up for a second and you go, what's going on? And then if you say, oh, well, you know, blah, 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 then you fall back asleep and you go back into it again, and da-da-da. But you know what? I'll say this last thing. I remember those times. It was a step outside of myself, a step outside of my world, like almost like an out-of-body experience, where it wasn't me fully engrossed in the living my life. It was me observing my life, taking like kind of like an aerial view and going, what the fuck? Like, really, you know? And I've done that, by the way, not just with alcohol and drugs, but relationships, you know, where I'll be like, no, he's the one, you know, and then all of a sudden I'll be like, hold on, moment of sanity. What the fuck are we doing? Like, can we not? And then, okay. And then, but he loves me. And, but you know, da-da-da-da. The sex is really good. And then next thing you know, you're back in it again and you're falling asleep again because your spirit's trying to speak, but you're not listening.
Absolutely. There's a Kenny Rogers song. I think it's Kenny Rogers. But it says, I just dropped in to see what condition my condition was in.
Oh, that's cute.
And every time I heard that song, that's what made me think about that. Like every once in a while, I would just drop in and all of a sudden recognize like where I'm at, what I'm doing. And I either have to make a decision to do something or not. Right. I do that a lot too. I mean, like imagine those times that you think, I should do the dishes. And that only lasts for a second, right? And then you're off and running again.
Right.
But those moments are going to come and the clarity is going to come and the willingness to want to get better has to kick in. So I did that, and just recently, and I'll say this because it has nothing to do with anything other than I was playing with my daughter, and she was on my lap, and she's just like her curly little hair was coming down, and it was flying all over the place, and she was smiling and laughing and having a good time. And just for a split second, man, I realized this is going to be a good memory. Right? Bottleable. Like I'm living in a good memory right now.
Yeah.
The second it stopped, and boom, it kicks right back in, and we go back to having fun and giggling and stuff, right? But I remember my mind, it jumps onto that, and my spirit goes, don't forget this, because you're going to love it, right? And then, boom, I go back into my reality. And
you know what's so interesting about that is that, you know, in recovery, we learn to live one day at a time, one moment at a time. We learn to be present, right? It's the one thing we didn't want to do.
Yeah, I know.
We don't really want to be present. But in those moments you're describing, in spite of ourselves, with all the stuff that we're going on and all the stuff we keep telling ourselves, it's going to be okay and this is okay and blah, blah, blah. There's moments when there's this space in which we're not on this this like horizontal time spectrum for a moment. We're on this vertical one where nothing matters but just this moment. And it's these pockets, these wake up, these little God shots when we are in our addiction. But they're also, like, as we're in recovery, we learn to dive into those things and really, like, build upon that. And that becomes our spirituality. That becomes the ability to appreciate your daughter in the moment, knowing that you would not have that ability or even maybe the chance to do it so much if you were in your addiction.
I wouldn't want it.
You wouldn't want it. You wouldn't be able to see the value of it. Well, maybe you would have, though. Maybe in a moment you would have had that parting of your mental seas for a moment to appreciate it and then go, yeah, and back up again.
Yeah.
You know? So it's very profound because we do have moments of sanity. We do have moments of like, what are we doing? Because we are, as much as we think that, you know, when we become spiritual, we are adding spirit to our lives, we are spiritual deep down. We are spirit.
Well, yeah.
We're tapping into that. So when we're running the stories of who we think we are and whatever we think that needs to happen, there are these breaking moments. You know, for me, it was when I would write a poem to myself, because I wrote over 500.
No fooling around.
Pleading with myself. You know, I wrote poems about death, and I wrote poems about life, and I wrote poems about him or her, and blah, blah, blah. But, like, I remember this one poem, and I actually affixed it to the wall next to my toilet, which is the last place that it would help me, because by then I have had some issues, because I am now at the last place I usually am when I was in my addiction. But I digress. It was a poem pleading with me not to do it anymore. I wrote a poem in that moment, that spiritual moment in the middle of whatever my, you know, stuff was, pleading to me from the sanest part of myself, pleading to me to stop taking those pills, to stop doing that behavior, to stop. And I wanted to put it on the wall to wake me up in the future, you know. And when it did, I would read it. It was like I'm already throwing up in the toilet. Like I'm already.
Yeah, right.
I'm already keeling over. I'm already feeling like no love for life whatsoever, you know. But that's just what it is, you know. It's the spirit wanting to be known. You know, it's like who we really are, wanting to be known. And we think we're going to become spiritual, but we're going to tap into that which we, in some way, shape, or form, you know, that sanity, that thing that we were looking for.
Absolutely. Well, there was a time I was going to get coffee one day, and I realized mind, body, and spirit are three different things, right? And it's all in me going to get coffee. A lot of these little epiphanies that I've had that I've built onto my recovery have just been in stupid little small moments, right?
Right.
And so when I'm going down, I just got done. I was working at this Christmas tree lot with a guy named Rigo, awesome guy. I had been there too long. It was too cold. I decided I was going to walk down and go get coffee. Well, when I get home, I lay on my bed, and my body does not want to get up, right? But my brain goes, hey, don't forget, you need coffee in the morning. And I go, that's right, I do need coffee in the morning. And then I go to get up, and my body's like, we don't want to go nowhere, bro. Let's all settle down. So I'll just kind of fast forward through this a little bit. So as I'm going, I finally get my body to get up. I start going. My brain is reminding me countless times, like, don't forget, you're going to hate tomorrow if you don't have coffee. You're going to hate tomorrow if you don't have coffee. I go, all right, fine, I'll go get coffee. So I start walking, right? My feet hurt, whatever. I get all the way down there, and as I get to the store, I realize I forgot my wallet.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
So in that moment in time, I'm like, what happened? Why did I forget my wallet? And my brain's like, hey, I reminded you of your cigarettes and your phone and your coffee. I can't, remind. I was like, you have one job, brain, to remind me of the things that I need. Right. And my body's like, well, we're not walking all the way back here. I promise you that. I start walking. My heel starts hurting a little bit more, and everything starts to get more intense. I've recognized that my brain just reminds me of the things I want in life, right? The things that have made me feel good, and the things that made me feel safe, and the things that I believe
that you taught yourself is your highest good.
Exactly. And then my body is just my body, right?
It just wants to feel instructions.
Good. Yeah.
Yeah, exactly.
So my soul and my spirit is the thing that governs between the two. And it tells it what it actually needs, right? Or I can force it. That's why when you hit that unmanageability, that's your soul finally going, what happened?
Yeah.
Right? What happened? You have that moment of clarity where it goes, please just stop for a second.
Yeah.
And you either go, okay, or you go, shut up, man. What are you doing? Let's go.
Yeah.
And then your brain and your body just kick right back in, right? And then your soul's running with these two things that it cannot stop.
As we go through our recovery, there is so many times when more and more will come to our memory, like of the moments, those moments of stillness before we made our next decision. Like I remember, so I was a stripper for most of the 90s, and when I was getting out of the industry and I moved to Texas, I had, I don't know how the guy knew, but like I met somebody in an airport on the way, and he asked me if I was a stripper and could I do private shows for him, and da-da-da-da. And so I did private shows for him on my way out of dancing. And they were $1,000 a show.
Dang.
And it was an interesting experience. He would wrap my body in cellophane and kiss my body. And, I'm an empath. I'm very big into energy. And so, like, on the surface of it, one could say, okay, it's a little different. But I don't know if this is hurting you. And so, and one could say that because there was somebody in my head saying that, rationalizing, justifying it. But I remember the last time I did it. I remember I was outside of the hotel, and I was in my car. I remember exactly where I was, and I remember the conversation in my head going, you don't need to do this. Oh, but I do. And, I was, I didn't want to go. I didn't want to do it. And I told myself I needed to. And so, like, I had that moment of just, like, my intuition going, don't. And I just did the thing with my survival skills and my headspace that I need to do because this is, whatever. And I went up there and I did it. And, like, what's really cool about that is that even though I did it, I was like, and by the way, I was sober. This was the beginning of my sobriety. But I was not just physically sober through that experience. I was awake. I know I just talked myself into this. I can't delude myself really, truly enough anymore. It's kind of like when they say alcohol stops working. My capacity to delude myself was not strong and effective enough for me to not go in there without a head full of me. And so it was two of me and him. and it was good that it was, because it became my last time. Do you know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
In spite of all my financial fears, my car was repoed because I got out of the industry, and I had illnesses from my drug use. I had seizures. I had all kinds of things. I was not fit for human consumption. I was on disability, and I was really I was a pretty thing. But I started to really just do what I could, live with myself with, and lived on disability. And my first mentor in recovery said, Lisa, you don't ever have to like a situation, but you have to like yourself in it. And
nice. That's a good one.
It is. Because that's the bar I had to start asking myself. So, I'll say this, and then we'll go to break. We incrementally talk ourselves into the next step down, into our new normal. But we also, in recovery, have the courage to go out of that comfort zone to the next one, and get to a place where we get sometime in the future where, we can't, 1 year sober me can't fathom in addiction me, and 10 years sober me can't even fathom 1 year sober me, and now 24 years sober me can't even fathom 15 years sober me, because incrementally we could be focused on the solution and the spiritual solution of self-honesty and running on intuition, right? And clearing that channel out that we could get better. And so if you're in a place where you feel like it's too much for you and you just don't see hope, just know that you didn't just, like Kevin said, just get there overnight. And so, but just incrementally, one step at a time, one day at a time, you can get into a better place by joining us in recovery. And please remember, we're about to go to break, but that the opinions expressed here are strictly those of the people who gave them, do not represent any 12-step program, or should replace your own intuition or professional medical advice. And we'll see you in just a little bit.
The Meeting Space is a facility with over 100 weekly recovery meetings for addiction from alcohol, drugs, sex, food, gambling, codependency, and PTSD. When someone is scared to go to their first meeting, we walk them through the process, ask them and answer questions to assuage their concerns. Many are court-ordered to attend, and we provide free court papers and teach them the process. Our glass-enclosed, soundproof children's playroom enables parents to be in a meeting while watching their children. We have healing workshops, craft fairs, and special authors who come to teach and sit with our fellowships. During COVID, we were declared an essential business by the County Commissioner's Office. We were kept open so that we can continue our daily work with traumatized chronic relapsers and those who would have used alcohol or drugs in isolation. Local businesses rent our space as well to financially help with this mission, and they get to have a great location for their business meeting or training. The recovery store in the center of our facility provides literature, clothing, medallions, and custom gifts to encourage, aid in, and celebrate a person's recovery from alcohol, drugs, PTSD, or unhealthy behaviors. Both the recovery store and the meeting space are open every day, including holidays. Saving lives, educating the community, reducing social stigma, providing a safe place for people to heal. Our nonprofit is supported entirely by donations by people like you who want everyone to have a place to go to heal.
Welcome back to the Real Recovery Show. Before the break, we were talking about those little God moments, those God shots, the moments of realization, the moments of clarity, and that how when we're in recovery, they build. But oftentimes when people are new to recovery, they can come with some prejudice about maybe they saw it on TV, recovery type events or meetings or something, or maybe they heard from someone else, but the mere mention of God immediately can bring up the idea of whatever it is their religious background is. And with yours, it was like more of an indifference to the concept of God. But some people have very strong resistance to anything of that. And it could stop a person from sure, they can admit that they have a problem, but this can't be their solution. And what I love about recovery is that it's so all-encompassing that it allows everybody to find a higher power of their own understanding, and that understanding can even change over time. So like the person who's religious minded could have more of a personal relationship with their God concept, and the person who's more atheistic could have more of a practical, maybe left brain understanding of, you know, the universe and the Big Bang and etc. And then you know, somebody who's agnostic can fine tune and maybe take what they like and leave the rest, and have a safe place to discuss it and hear other people's concepts of a higher power. And then the person who has, you know, like a very strong aversion to the God concept, like they believe that maybe it exists, but they are pissed at it. You know, like, where were you when my mother was blah 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 blah? You know, where were you when this happened, and da 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 da. And so for those, you know, and I say for those, that was me. I had, and I don't know how I had it, right? Because I was born Jewish. And in Judaism, there's no like hell and damnation God like that. It's not a thing. Like, there's no hell like that. But like I grew up in a Christian-based society, as we have it, whether you realize it or not. And like the idea of guilt and shame. I mean, I was bad girl by our society standards. You know, I was not. If there was a punishing God, an abandoning God, certainly I was going to be punished and abandoned. And so in my first, in recovery, I had to set aside everything I thought I knew, and I had to be willing to start from scratch. And so what I did was, so for a while I had two gods. I had two higher powers, because I had the God that abandoned, I had the God that judged, I had the God that that punished. I had that God in my mind, but I didn't want to turn to that God. I didn't want to. And whenever I would feel like shame or guilt or something, and it would come up in a big chunk of PTSD, that's the God that would come to my mind. But I had this other thing that I started, and what I learned to start is something that I've helped a lot of people do. And so maybe, you know, maybe this is something that could help you, is to start from what you do know, even if it's just the tiniest thing. What about those God shots? What about those moments of clarity? What about those times when somehow, with no real reason to know this, you somehow knew something was about to happen? Or an energy about a person, and something in you said no, right? And you later found out why. Or you thought of a person and you felt a concern, and then you call them and you find out something's going on, right? These little things that you do know, these God shots that you do remember, and you may not want to call it God, but like down deep within each of us is this intuitive experience. And you know, like, whether it is a gut feeling, you call it, or somehow you're really like tuned into the vibe and you know what you're doing when you're doing a thing, or somehow you know something but you don't know how you know it. That is what I started with, and it seems like a little, but it was the only solid truth for me that I can hold on to. The idea that I have had moments where I felt something looking out for me or coming to me in a way that made me see things in a different way, even if it was just for a small experience here and there and whatever like that. These moments of that, and that is what I could build upon, you know? And then I started to build upon that. And so the other thing I'll say is that because I had this idea that God was punishing and abandoning, the reason I found out, and this was like mind-blowing to me, the reason I found out that I believe that about God is because my parents were. My parents were punishing and abandoning.
Oh,
my
okay.
parents were in addiction. You know, my dad's dad hit him. He was a semi-pro boxer. My dad hit me. with the belt buckle, like
I never thought about that before. That makes a lot of sense.
my higher power when I'm a kid, the authorities in my life, the ones that get to decide my well-being, my gods are my mom and dad, who in my life were using. Bear, I'm his higher power. Although sometimes he wants to be mine. And so I started to see that I was projecting onto this empty screen, this projection of what God was, because it was an authority, it was a power greater than me, and it was somebody. There were people who were sick and who neglected and shamed and punished physically, and I knew when I went through that shift that I needed to build upon my own inner. Experience, but I also needed to watch out for that God. And it was always up here, by the way. If you're watching this on video and you're not on radio, like I have my hand up to my right, and it's like, for some reason, it was always this God concept up and to the right, somewhere, some dark whatever. And like when I was afraid of them, other people and what they thought, it was always up and to the left for some reason. Maybe studies have been done. I've never researched this, but I knew it wasn't my concept of the higher power, because it wasn't deep within me. It was just a dark kind of higher power, and of course if you have a higher power that you're afraid of or you feel is not even there anyway, how could you possibly turn to it? So How did you go from the excuse me. So they say that dog is God backwards, God spelled backwards, but sit. That's okay. Thank you for protecting us. Thank you. Okay, so how did you go from the indifferent God to really tuning in to having some higher power consciousness in your recovery?
So it started off with, first off, I got to say, the reason a higher power for me is important is because I need to contrast myself to what I want to become, right? Not what I shouldn't be, but what I want to become. So when this first started happening, I remember my sister had come home from breakfast one day, and we're all sitting in there. When she comes in, me and my brother on the couch, we're like, where you been? And she's like, well, my mom took me to breakfast. I was like, Shelly, we all have the same mom. You could just say mom took me to breakfast, And she goes, well, my mom took me to breakfast, so I don't know what your mom's going to do with you, right? So, and she was right. There's no reason my mom would hit me up for breakfast because she knows I wouldn't want to go, right? And this is in adulthood too. We weren't kids or anything. We were all adults. And so she's going to take me to lunch or maybe to a movie or something like that. But anyways, the reason she does that is because she knows that's where she gets to connect with us, right? And in those moments, she's going to pass down her lessons, right? Or talk to us, give us suggestions, make us feel comfortable in the environment that we're in, right? And then we learn the best, right? We listen the hardest. So I can't imagine a God having a worse parenting tactics than my mom. So I remember thinking one day, I would imagine God is going to talk to each person individually because it is our God. Right. So our God is going to build a relationship with you. He's going to take you places that he knows you'll be the most beneficial for if you're listening. I love that. So there's a suggestion base that says that God's going to give me a suggestion. And to be honest with you, the reason I fell in love with this higher power is because I just had to, the insanity of my addiction gave me this willingness to make the world so big, right? And I disconnect and feel like I could do anything once I got sober, because that was the thing holding me back. I don't recognize that it's me holding me back at that time, right? It was my addiction and all the terrible people that I knew. So this world, now that I'm free of my addiction, I can go out there and take on the world.
The world is your oyster.
The world is my oyster. So I'm looking on Facebook, and I find out that I'm a pantheist, right? Because I believe God is everything.
Okay.
But really what it breaks down to is I remember thinking about a swamp and thinking that a swamp can counterbalance itself. It can fix itself whenever there's an issue, right? To make sure that the swamp and all of the organisms that live in the swamp keep existing. So would a swamp know that it exists? Probably not. But if we expand it out to the world, now the world does the same thing, as counterbalances and measures to make sure that the weather keeps going, right? And the climates don't change drastically and all of us get to keep living on this planet. So does a planet know it exists? Probably not. But over the millennia of the universe existing, could the universe grow knowledge of its own existence? Maybe, right? Because we did, right? Or the universe knowledge of his own existence, and then found an animal on a planet that could sustain its image. Because remember, we were created in its image. So a lot of this comes from Christianity, right? The idea of it, because I don't believe it's word for word, but its image, so it embarked its image onto some ape that was there that could last and recognize its own existence, right? And grow consciousness. So now human beings exist, right? Because if God wants to, if there's a creator out there and that God wants to explore himself, he's going to do that through us, right? So he gives these apes consciousness. So now I have this God that it doesn't matter how I believe, just as long as I do. And I was given this gift of consciousness to connect to something bigger than myself and find a way through this life that allows me to build on this connection and feel as a part of the universe as humanly possible. And that just takes away all my limitations, right? The only thing I had love was the word sin, and you had even brought this up earlier, that sin is missing the mark. That's all it really means. However, if I'm living in sin, that means I'm just shooting arrows willy-nilly, right? Ain't nobody want to hang out with someone shooting arrows willy-nilly, right? So if you're living in sin, I don't want to be around you. But if you make a sin and then you square up your shoulders and aim again, that's a totally different animal, right? So even in the religion itself, it's saying you're going to make mistakes. Our job is to help you correct those, right? Our job is to help you find a connection.
It really does depend on whether or not where your head's at. If you're focused on destruction or you're focused on growing and freeing yourself and being helpful to other people.
Absolutely.
You know, like that whole progress, not perfection. Like nobody comes into recovery like just because they stopped using alcohol and drugs and like, oh, I'm perfect now. No character defects, nothing to see here, nothing to heal, nothing to write, nothing to talk about, no secrets, no shame tapes, no programming.
No shame tapes.
You know, nothing. You know, I'm good.
That progress, that in order to have progress, you have to have failure, right? You have to. People don't succeed in success.
And you have to be okay with it too. You have to be okay, because if you fail, air quote, meaning you're not meeting your own expectations, because that's all the failure is. So you're not meeting your own expectations of what success would look like. And so now you're in a situation where you're going to either browbeat yourself and not move on, you know, and use it as an excuse to be self-destructive, or you're going to see it as, oh, that didn't work. What could I see differently? What can I do differently? Let's try again, but with new information.
And so the pursuit of happiness, right? I remember thinking about this one time. What is the pursuit of happiness? Because I'm never happy once I've succeeded, right? I fall into complacency, I get bored, and I burn it down. Not because I'm afraid of success, which a lot of people say, and I don't think that to be true. I think you should just get bored, and you got to find something else to do. And usually the easiest things to jump on board with are the more devastating things, right? But when I'm going through this pursuit of happiness, what I'm actually doing is I'm collecting obstacles and overcoming them. And while I'm doing that, I'm finding happiness. So a lot of the times in these moments where I feel like the world is coming down on me and I'm just not there, right? And I just am not beating anything, I know happiness is just about to happen, right? Because this is when I find it. So in my misery, I know eventually I'll find happiness if I'm working for it, which is the idea of progress, not perfection.
Sure. However, one of the reasons why we're not happy until we get the thing that we think we need, and then why we're not happy after we get it, is because we are basing our serenity on the thing being, on the thing happening. So like we have this proverbial carrot dangling over in front of our faces, and we're like, I'm gonna get it, I'm gonna get it, I'm gonna get it, I'm gonna get it. We're the horse running that race, chasing that carrot, and but we then either stop and we get the carrot, and then we're like, there's no more carrot, and so there has to be a whole new carrot. There has to be a whole new thing, or we don't get the carrot, and then we're frustrated. And so if you're a good horse owner and you're doing that shit in the first place, you know, please give the horse the carrot. But anyway,
that's right. Terrible person.
But when we realize that recovery is more of a journey and not a destination, and that our happiness never really came from the getting or the getting there, that we were telling ourselves that we will not be happy unless we get to this thing, then it became a game of hide and go seek with our own serenity. And so it gets to a place where you're like, you know what? If I keep chasing goals for my happiness, I'm not going to really truly experience true happiness. And then happiness becomes, instead, am I intuitively doing this? Am I appreciating? Am I being present? Am I doing this thing that I'm doing, letting go of the results of this, but heading in that direction and not valuing the destination more than the journey.
Well, I think that's only the case if, like, for instance, what if the goal is serenity, right? What if the goal is happiness? What if the goal is
It
love?
can't be then in the future, though.
But you could be feeling it in the moment and then not, right?
True. You could actually have something coming up to heal. You're acknowledging that you're very uncomfortable. You know that this is going to pass and that it's coming up to heal. You know you're not feeling really serene, but you know you will. You know that if you do the work and you question the thoughts and you feel your feelings, right? You turn it over and you get shifts in perception, you know you will be restored to sanity. You know because you had it before. When the other things come up to heal, you've gotten peace again, a deeper peace, a more powerful peace, because now it's peace with one less thing blocking the way.
And that would be what I consider the pursuit of happiness.
And
right?
okay, so I like that. I definitely like that. Not that I don't like, but I do feel like sometimes in our efforts to be in our society, not just in recovery, or in our addiction, but like we could be so like, it's another way of saying, I'm going to be happy. It's going to be good. And it really creates a message to the mind that says, it's not good. I can't be happy, and it's a strong element in the recipe of restless, irritable, and discontent when we are not okay, when we are too, and I'm a driven person, like I'm sometimes too driven, and so I have to always temper that and go, is this what you want me to do? Is this what really resonates to my higher power, to my inner direction? I have to, because if I get too far ahead of myself and I'm like so focused, so tunnel vision focused on what I think is going to make me happy, and I could do that with anything. I could do that with accomplishing something. I could do that with a relationship. I could do that with a lot of what my body looks like. I could do it with money. I could do it with anything. I can like focus in and tell myself this is going to make me happy, and everything else was shit until this happens, and then I'll be like, I've arrived. But you get to that, and it's a lie you tell yourself to get you motivated to do it in the first place, and you get there, and it's not what you thought it was. It's not under that rock. It's not in that new car. It's not in that relationship. It's not. And it teaches you.
I know, isn't that the exciting part of the whole thing, right? Like, we're talking about finding a higher power, and finding a higher power, consistently making mistakes on what you believe your higher power to be until you find one, right? You're going to make this connection over a higher power over time, and there's going to be certain things that you believe and for a fact your higher power would not agree with, and then after a while you're like, well, maybe that's not such a big deal. You know what I'm saying?
Right.
Maybe thinking that this guy's wrong isn't really right. It's just different from me. So we're going to consistently have these mistakes in front of us, right? And that is the pursuit. I think that if it wasn't for that, if I didn't know I was going to be wrong consistently, I wouldn't try. Right? Because when I know something very, very well, I don't try to get better at it.
No, your mind's closed.
Yeah, absolutely. Why would I keep going to do something perfect at? I'm perfect. Come on.
No, I should just hold seminars and everybody just needs to
exactly.
Put money in a bucket and we're good. Yeah.
So I think a lot of people they get this. Again, you find religion, you find structure, you find different types. And I use Christianity a lot because that's what I'm most familiar with. So bear with me as I say that. But you feel like you're failing at Christianity, right? You feel like this is what religion looks like and you are not doing it. And you start to feel this guilt and remorse over the person you were. You got to remember, and especially a lot of the programs teach us, all of those things that happened to you in the past are going to turn into experiences that you can share with someone else. And they will see your strength in that experience. And when they see that strength, you pass hope.
Yeah.
Right? Hope is what we want above all else, that we can also find happiness. It doesn't mean we have to find it in the same way. We can find it in a spiritual path that gives us that spiritual upliftment that allows us to pass a message on to the next person, right? Even if it's just in the moment, right? These moments don't stop just because we stopped using, right? We're going to get moments of clarity all throughout, just like that thing with my sister. I've had other moments where it just really defined what my religion looked like, right? Yeah. And what my structure looked like. So when someone asks me, are you spiritual? Absolutely. Right? Absolutely. There's no way I'm not. Yeah. Right? And do I think what you're doing is wrong? Absolutely not.
That's what I love about spirituality, and this is what we learn in recovery, is that there's room for everyone. There's room for everyone. It's like you can believe whatever it is that works for you, and I am not to say that that is true or not true. There's room for everyone. Not only is there room for everyone else's concept of a higher power working or not working for them, but there's room for each version of me and my higher power concept as I go, because you said, there are things you can just tell yourself, that God would not, your higher power would not be okay with, right? And for me, there were blocks, there was inner resistances where there were things I would not take and tune into God consciousness or higher consciousness or my intuition, because they were my secrets, they were my perversions, they were my my ideas, they were the places that I didn't want anybody, let alone God or anybody else, to like I already pre-decided that God would not like it, and and there's two areas specifically, and one was sex and one was food. I just had this,
food.
Yeah, I had this idea, I know what I should be doing, and I'm not doing it, because one of my addictions was bulimia, and I finally had enough of those God shot moments, those pauses in between insanity, and that said, and it was fucking hilarious. I, to this day, laugh at what my intuition said that day. For someone who likes to eat as much as you say you do, you're certainly not present when you do it. I was like, oh my God.
That's crazy. You know how many times especially because I used to be really fat, right? And I would just shovel food in my mouth and just love the food so much, but not even be present while I was eating it.
Didn't even taste it.
Oh my God. That just shocked me. I wasn't even present.
It's not even present. So my intuition said, take me with you. And I said, well, I'm not going to eat what I know you want me to eat, because I'm going to eat some things, I'm going to throw it up. And I don't think that's what you want me to do.
I know.
But my intuition said, actually, you're going to do it with or without me. So do it with me. And it was mind-blowing to me that I could then, because the whole purpose of addiction is to be anywhere but here, anytime but now, anybody but me, feeling anything but this. And so here was me being more present and more intuitive, doing a thing that I was doing to check out and not feeling any guilt or judgment in doing it. And it helped heal it. It healed it. Because I had done a whole bunch of different things in recovery to try to stop that stuff, to try to stop not eating whatever, and not having that kind of mentality. And it was by bringing the mess to the messenger, it was bringing the darkness to the light, that I realized there's no way these things can heal with all the things that I'm doing and throwing at it, the therapy and whatever, if I am not letting my higher power consciousness, my intuition, be my focus too while I'm doing it. And so that prejudice, that idea I'm going to be judged and shamed, is because I did get judged and shamed when I was younger. There was things that happened, so I had my own little proof that made total sense in my own head. But it wasn't the truth. To be willing to question my concept of a higher power is to be also willing to question every level of programming, every story, every narrative that I have about what that higher power would want for me and what it could do for me and what it is and where it is. Being willing to take everything and tune in to what resonates more. So I feel like you and I could talk a lot.
Yeah, I could go on this all day.
I feel like we'll be talking more, and I'm so grateful that you came on the show today and
thank you for
had
having
this
me.
Conversation. We will definitely do this again, and thank you for joining us. Again, you can watch us on Facebook, YouTube, on Amazon Fire TV. You can listen to us on the PHLV radio app. You can get our podcast on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, and iHeartRadio. You can go to themeetingspace.com and look at all of our videos over there. And if you're interested in being on a show, definitely fill out an intake form or contact us through the contact form. I'm super grateful we got to have this conversation. I love deep conversations where we could just talk about our experience and our insight and get more ahas, because I'm taking away from this show alone that visual of having the insanity and then that moment of stillness when you have that moment of clarity and then what happens. And so I hope you got a lot out of it too, and thank you, Kevin.
Yeah. Thank you for having me. I had a great time.
Me
This is
too.
a blast. I hope I do come back.
Yay! All right, so thank you for joining us today on The Real Recovery Show. We'd like to give a special thanks to our sponsor and gracious host, PHLV Radio here in Las Vegas. See you next week.
Radio.
Woo!